coma. The funeral was, I thought, a very affecting affair. As well as ourselves, all the English. हाँ मतलब funeral तो बहुत ही वैसा impact करना था. As well as ourselves, all the English people in Hasana attended it. Even Sheila really was there, looking quiet and subdued in dark coat and skirt. मतलब जो वो था funeral था उसमें तो सब लोग आए और सब लोग दुखी थे कि भैया ये क्या हो गया. I hope that she was being a little remorseful for all the unkind things she had said. अब इसको ये लगे कि भैया उसको थोड़ा तो दुख होना चाहिए, शीला रेली ने बहुत कुछ बोला. When we got back to the house, I followed Dr. Leidner into the office and broached the subject of my departure. He was very nice about it, thanked me for what I had done. Done had been worse than useless. Mr. Leidner से उसने कहा कि मैं हूँ जा रही हूँ. तो डॉक्टर लाइडनर ने इस नर्स ने कहा कि मैं जाना चाह रही हूँ. डॉक्टर लाइडनर बहुत भले थे, उन्होंने कहा हाँ जाओ, ठीक है ना. और कहते भाई आपने काम अच्छा किया. बोले काम किया गया एकदम यूजलेस. एंड इंसिस्टेड ऑन माई एक्सेप्टिंग एन एक्स्ट्रा वीक सैलरी. और मिस्टर लाइडनर ने कहा कि देखिए आप एक एक्स्ट्रा वीक की सैलरी पक्का लीजिएगा. आई प्रोटेस्टेड बिकॉज रियली आई फेल्ट आई डन नथिंग टू अर्न इट. अब इसको लगा कि यार मैं एक्स्ट्रा वीक की सैलरी नहीं ले सकती, मैंने नथिंग. Indeed, Dr. Ladner, I'd rather not have any salary at all. If you just refund my travel expenses, that's all I want. मेरे पास traveling expenses को refund कर दीजिए, कोई salary मत दीजिए, मैं एकदम useless रही हूँ. But he won't hear of that. You see, I said, I don't feel I deserve it, Dr. Leidner. I mean, I failed. She, my coming didn't save her. मतलब मैं fail हो गई, मेरे आने से उसकी जान नहीं बची. Now don't get that idea into your head, nurse, he said earnestly. After all, I didn't engage you as a female detective. मैंने कोई detective थोड़ी बनाया था. I never dreamt my wife's life was in danger. I was convinced it was all nerves and she had worked herself up into a rather curious mental state. You did all one could do. She liked and trusted you. तुम जो कर सकती तुमने किया, वो तुम्हें trust और पसंद करती थी. And I think in her last days she felt happier and safer because of your being here. There is nothing for you to reproach yourself. वहाँ अपने पे पैरों पर उसमें मत मानो, ठीक है ना. मेरी वाइफ जो थी आखिरी दिनों में तुम्हारे से बहुत खुश थी और खुशी से रही. His voice quivered a little. I knew that he was thinking. He was the only one to blame for not having taken Mrs. Leidner's fears seriously. अब मिस्टर लाइडनर की जो आवाज़ थी वो थोड़ी सी हिली. तो इसको हिली तो उसको ये लगा कि मिस्टर लाइडनर को ये लग रहा है कि भाई मेरी गलती है. Dr. Leidner, I said curiously, have you ever come to any conclusion about these anonymous letters? He said with a sigh, I don't know what to believe. Has Mercury Polo come to any definite conclusion? तो इसने बोला कि आप कुछ conclusion पे आए about these letters. तो डॉक्टर लाइडनर बोले क्या मिस्टर पॉयरो किसी conclusion पे आए? He hadn't yesterday, I said, steering rather neatly. I thought between truth and fiction. After all, he hadn't until I told him about Miss Johnson. It was on my mind that I'd like to give Dr. Leidner a hint and see if he reacted. तो मतलब ऐसी बात हुई कि डॉक्टर मिसेस जॉनसन के देखें कि क्या रिएक्ट करते हैं. In the pleasure of seeing him and Miss Johnson together the day before and his affection and reliance on her, I'd forgotten all about the letters. वो letters क्या पूरी भूल गई. उसने ये देखा था डॉक्टर लाइडनर और मिस जॉनसन जो हैं दोनों साथ साथ बहुत खुश हैं. Even now I felt it was perhaps rather mean of me to rather bring it up. Even if she had written them, she had had a bad time after Mrs. Leidner's death. Yet I did want to see whether that particular possibility had ever entered Dr. Leidner's head. Anonymous letters are usually the work of a woman, I said. I wanted to see how he'd take it. Normally anonymous letters जो हैं एक औरत ही लिखती है. देखिए डॉक्टर लाइडनर से कैसे देखते हैं. I suppose they are, he said with a sigh. But you seem to forget, nurse, that these may be genuine. They may actually be written by Frederick Boisna. No, I haven't forgotten, I said. But I can't believe somehow that that's the real explanation. I do, he said. It's all nonsense is being one of the expedition staff. This is just an ingenious theory of Monsieur Poirot. I believe the truth is much simpler. The man is a madman, of course. He's been hanging around the place, perhaps in disguise of some kind. And somehow or the other, he's got in that fatal afternoon. The servants may be lying. They may have been bribed. उसने बोला देखो फ्रेडरिक ब्रॉसनर ने ही लेटर शायद लिखा है उसने शायद सर्वेंट्स को ब्राइब वाइब किया अंदर घुसा मार के चला गया आई सपोज इट्स पॉसिबल आई सेड डाउटफुली फिर क्या हुआ डॉक्टर लाइडना वेंट ऑन विद अ ट्रेस ऑफ इरिटेबिलिटी इट्स ऑल वेरी वेल फॉर मिस्टर पायरो टू सस्पेक्ट द मेंबर्स ऑफ माय एक्सपेडिशन आई एम परफेक्टली सर्टन नन ऑफ देम हैव एनीथिंग टू डू विद इट आई वर्क विद देम आई नो देम अब मिस्टर पायरो हो सकता है कि मेरे एक्सपेडिशन के सारे लोगों पर शक करें पर मैं सबके साथ रह चुका हूँ और वो नहीं He stopped suddenly and then he said, is that your experience, nurse, that anonymous letters are usually written by women? It isn't always the case, I said, but there's a certain type of feminine spitefulness that finds relief that way. I suppose you're thinking of Mrs. Mercado, he said. Then he shook his head. Even if she were malicious enough to wish to hurt Louis, she would hardly have the necessary knowledge. Mrs. Mercado नहीं करेंगे, मिस्टर लाइडना ने कहा. अगर इंटेंशन भी अगर वो भी हो तब भी हार्म नहीं करेंगे. I remember the earlier letters in the Attache case. If Mrs. Leitner had left that unlocked and Mrs. Mercado had been alone in the house one day pondering about, she might have easily found them and read them. Men never seem to think of the simpler possibilities. And apart from her, there was only Miss Johnson, I said, watching him. That will be quite ridiculous. You know, a little smile with which he said it was quite conclusive. The idea of Miss Johnson being the author of the letters had never entered his head. मिस्टर लाइडना ने यह माना भी नहीं था मिस जॉनसन वो लेटर लिख सकती हैं. I hesitated just for a moment, but I didn't say anything. One doesn't like giving away a fellow woman, and besides, I've been a witness of Miss Johnson's genuine and moving remorse. What was done was done. Why expose Dr. Leidner's to fresh disillusion on top of other troubles? It was arranged that I should leave on the following day. And I arranged through Dr. Rari to stay for a day or two with the matron of the hospital, whilst I made arrangements for returning to England either via Baghdad or direct via Nisipin by car in the train. मतलब इससे कहा कि मैं अब इंग्लैंड जा रही हूँ अगले दिन मैं निकल जाऊंगी. Dr. Leidner was kind enough to say that he would like me to choose a memento from amongst his wife's things. Oh no, really, Dr. Leidner, I said, I couldn't. It's much too kind of you. मतलब मेरी बीवी की चीज़ में से आप कुछ मोमेंटो ले जाओ. तो इसने कहा कि नहीं मेरा मन नहीं है. He insisted, but I should like you to have something. And Louis, I'm sure, would have wished it. And then he went on to suggest that I should have a tortoise shell toilet set. मैं उसका tortoise shell का toilet set है वो लेके चली जाऊँ. Oh no, Dr. Leidner. Why, that's the most expensive set. I couldn't really. She had no sisters, you know. No one would want these things, and there's no one else to have them. इतना expensive जो tortoise shell है वो मतलब वो लुई का जो है ना वो जो है वो नहीं चाहती थी कि वो किसी और के पास जाए. I quite imagine that he wouldn't want them to fall into Mrs. Mercado's greedy little hands. And I don't think that he did want them to offer to Miss Johnson. He went on kindly. You just think it over. By the way, here is the key of Louis' jewel case. Perhaps you will find something there you would rather have. And I should be very grateful if you would pack up all her clothes. लुई का वो जो ज्वेलरी केस है वो ये रहा और उसमें से जो आपको लेना है वो ले लो और जो भी उसके क्लोथ्स हैं वो कर लो. I dare say really can find a use for them among some of the poor Christian families in Hassana. Really उनको उसके कपड़ों को ले जा करके वो जो क्रिश्चियंस हैं फैमिलीज ऐसे न उनमें दे सकता है. I was very glad to be able to do that for him and I expressed my willingness. I set about it at once. Mrs. Leitner had only a very simple wardrobe with her, and it was soon sorted and packed up in a couple of suitcases. All her papers had been in a small attache case. The jewel case contained a few simple trinkets: a pearl ring, a diamond brooch, a small string of pearls, and one or two plain gold bar brooches of the safety pin type, and a string of large amber beads. Naturally, I wasn't going to take the pearls or diamonds, but I hesitated a bit between the amber beads and the toilet seat. In the end, however, I didn't see why I shouldn't take the latter. It was a kindly thought on Mr. Leidner's part, and I was sure there wasn't any patronage about it. I take it in the spirit it had been offered without any false pride. After all, I had been fond of her. तो उसने कहा कि मैं टॉयलेट सेट लेके चली जाऊंगी. टॉयलेट सेट. Well, that was all done and finished with. The suitcases packed, the jewel case locked up again and put separate to give Dr. Leidner with the photograph of Mrs. Leidner to, you know, Mrs. Leidner's father, and one or two personal odd little ends. The room looked bare and forlorn, emptied of all its accoutrements when I had finished. There was nothing more for me to do, and yet somehow or the other I shrank from leaving the room. It seemed as though there was something still to do, something I ought to see or something I ought to have known. अब इसने पूरा काम खत्म किया, इसको लगा कि भाई अब इस रूम में कुछ करना नहीं है, पर इसका एक हंच था कि कुछ बचा है. I'm not superstitious, but the idea did pop into him that my head that perhaps Mrs. Leidner's spirit was still hanging about the room and trying to get in touch with me. I remember once at the hospital, some of the girls got a planchette, and really, it wrote some very remarkable things. Okay, ma'am. Perhaps I thought I'd never thought of such a thing and might be made a mistake. Mama, ठीक है, खुली हुई है. As I say, one gets all worked up to imagine all sorts of foolishness sometimes. I prowled around the room uneasily, touching this and that, but of course there wasn't anything in the room but bare furniture. There was nothing slipped behind the drawers or tucked away. I couldn't hope to find anything of that kind. In the end, it sounds rather petty, but as I say, one gets worked up. I did a rather queer thing. I went and lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I deliberately tried to forget who and what I was. I tried to think myself back to that fatal afternoon. उस रात क्या हुआ होगा उस आफ्टरनून में. मैं लेटी और मैंने आंखें बंद की और सोचना शुरू किया. I was Mrs. Leidner lying here resting peaceful, unsuspicious. It's extraordinary how you can work yourself up. I'm a perfectly normal, matter of fact individual, not the least bit spooky. But I tell you that after I'd lain there about 5 minutes, I began to feel spooky. I didn't try to resist, I deliberately encouraged the feeling. I said to myself, I'm Mrs. Leidner, I'm lying here, half asleep. उसने रोल प्ले करना शुरू किया. Presently, very soon now, the door's going to open. I kept on saying that as though I was hypnotizing myself. It's just about 1:30, it's just about the time. The door is going to open, the door is going to open, and I shall see who comes. I kept my eyes glued on that door. Presently, it was going to open. I should see it open, and I should see the person who opened it. I must have been a little overawed that afternoon to imagine I could solve the mystery that way. But I did believe it. A sort of chill passed down my back and settled in my legs. They felt numb and paralyzed. You're going into a trance, I said, and in that trance you'll see. And once again I repeated monotonously again and again. The door is going to open, the door is going to open. The cold, numbed feeling grew more intense. And then slowly, I just began to see the door just beginning to open. It was horrible. It was horrible. I've never known anything so horrible before or since. I was paralyzed, chilled through and through. I couldn't move. For the life of me, I couldn't have moved. And I was terrified. sick and blind and dumb with terror, and start slowly opening the door so noiseless. In a minute, I should see. Slowly, slowly, wider and wider. Bill Coleman came quietly in. He must have had the shock of his life. I bounded off the bed, Bill Coleman, with a scream of terror and hurled myself across the room. He stood stock still, his blunt pink face pinker and mouth open wide with surprise. Bill Coleman. Hello, Lulu, he said. What's up, nurse? I came back to the reality with a crash. Goodness, Mr. Coleman, I said, how you startled me. Sorry, he said with a momentary grin. I saw then that he was holding a little bunch of scarlet ranunculus in his hand. Ranunculus with flowers only. They were pretty little flowers and they grew wild on the sides of the tell. Mrs. Glidener had been very fond of them. He blushed and got rather as he said, one can't get any flowers or things in Hassanai. Seemed rather rotten not to have any flowers for the grave. I thought I'd just nip in here and put a little posy in that little pot. Think she always had flowers on her table. Sort of show she wasn't forgotten, eh? A bit asinine. Asinine. I know, but well, I mean to say. I thought it was very nice of him. He was all very murder in Mesopotamia for wrong. I thought it was very nice of him. He was all pink with embarrassment like Englishmen are when they have done anything sentimental. I thought of it as very sweet though. And I picked up a little pot and went and got some water in it and put the flowers in it. I really thought much more of Mr. Coleman for this idea of his. It showed he had a heart and nice feelings about things. He didn't ask me again and what made me let out such a squeal, and I'm thankful he didn't. I should have felt a fool explaining. Stick to common sense in future, woman, I said to myself as I settled my cuffs and smoothed my apron. You're not cut out for this psychic stuff. I bustled about doing my own packing and kept myself busy for the rest of the day. Father Levigny was kind enough to express great distress at my leaving. He said my cheerfulness and common sense had been such a help to everybody. Common sense, I am glad he didn't know about my idiotic behavior in Mrs. Leidner's room. We have not seen Merkel Pyro today, he remarked. I told him that Pyro said he was going to be busy all day sending off telegrams. Father Levigny raised his eyebrows. Telegrams to America? I suppose so, he said. All over the world, but I think that was rather a foreign exaggeration. And then I got rather red, remembering that Father Levigny was a foreigner himself. He didn't seem offended, though, just laughed quite pleasantly and asked me if there was any news of the man with the squint. I said I didn't know, but I hadn't heard of any. Father Levigny asked me again about the time Mrs. Leidner and I had noticed the man and how he had seemed to be standing on tiptoe and peering through the window. It seems clear the man had some overwhelming interest in Mrs. Leidner, he said thoughtfully. I wondered since whether the man could possibly have been a European, got up to look like an Iraqi. That was a new idea for me, and I considered it carefully. I'd taken it for granted that the man was a native. But of course, when I came to think of it, I was really going to cut I was really going by the cut of his clothes and the yellowness of his skin. Father Livigny declared his intention of going round outside the house to the place where Mrs. Leitner and I had seen the man standing. You never know, he might have dropped something in the detective stories the criminal always does. I expect in real life criminals are more careful, I said. I fed some shocks I had just finished darning and put them on the table in the living room for the men to sort out when they came in. And then there was nothing much to do. I went up on the roof. Miss Johnson was standing there. Amma suno. But she didn't hear me. I got up right to her before and she noticed me. But long before that I had seen her, there was something very wrong. She was standing in the middle of the roof, staring straight at front of her. And there was the most awful look on her face. मुझे लग रहा है मिस जॉनसन को पता लग गया है.
क्या पता लग गया है?
मुझे लग रहा है कुछ जॉनसन को पता है. As though she had seen something she couldn't possibly believe. It gave me quite a shock. मुझे लग रहा है जॉनसन को पता लग गया. कुछ होगा, कुछ गड़बड़ होगा अभी. Mind you, I had seen her upset the other evening, but this was quite different. My dear, I said, hurrying to her, whatever is the matter? She turned her head at that and stood looking at me, almost as if she didn't see me. What is it? I persisted. She made a queer sort of grimace, as though she was trying to swallow, but her throat was so dry. She said hoarsely, I have seen something. What have you seen? Tell me. Whatever can it be? You look all in. She gave an effort to pull herself together, but she looked pretty dreadful. She said still in that same dreadful choked voice. I've seen how someone could come in from outside and no one would ever guess. I followed the direction of her eyes, but I couldn't see anything. Mr. Reitner was standing in the door of the photographic room, and Father Livigny was just crossing the courtyard. But there was nothing else. I turned back puzzled and found her eyes fixed on mine with the strangest expression in them. Really, I said, I don't see what you mean. Won't you explain? But she shook her head. Not now, later. We ought to have seen. Oh, we ought to have seen. If you'd only tell me. But she shook her head. I've got to think it out. मतलब मिस जॉनसन को शायद पता लग गया. पता लग गया. टेरेस पे कौन था? लाइटनर था ना. कुछ पता लग गया उसको. And pushing past me, she went stumbling down the stairs. I didn't follow her as she obviously didn't want me with her. Instead, I sat down on the parapet and tried to puzzle things out. But I didn't get anywhere. There was only the one way into the courtyard through the big arch. Just outside it, I could see the water boy and his horse and the Indian cook talking to him. Nobody could have passed them and come in without seeing him. I shook my head in perplexity and went down again. और ये चैप्टर खत्म हो गया.